Welcome to Educate, Agitate, Organise Saturday. This is a weekly programme that's a joint production between Don't Leave Organise and Socialist Telly. Really excited to be joined by my co-host Kathy Augustine this week, who is the secretary for Don't Leave Organise, as well as wearing many other hats. This is a programme all about shining a spotlight on and celebrating grassroots activism and organising in the UK. Really excited to have this week's guests on. Kathy, do you want to tell us a bit about what we're going to be talking about this week?
Sure. I'm really excited to be sharing this programme with you, Matt, co-hosting. It's so timely to have Labour Black Socialists on the show. Many of us are halfway through attending the TUC Black Workers Conference, running for 3 days, finishing on Sunday. Some really inspiring speakers. For me, in particular, I'm looking forward to hearing from Belle, Ribeiro Addy, and Roger Mackenzie. Wanted to point out that the formation of Labour Black Socialists, which I've also joined, and its initial increasing growth in membership, it certainly highlights a real need in our party and in our movement for safe, inclusive spaces. So Labour Black Socialists use black as very much a uniting term used for all of us who don't identify as white, having heritages from global regions, marginalized by colonialism, feeling that in your community, and opposing white supremacy and racism based predominantly on skin color. So very inclusive, a reflection of the unity of oppressed groups and how powerful that can be. And on that point, we've seen another week of resistance, protests, vigils, highlighting the increase in violence against women, as well as the proposed increase, as well as real increase in Tory oppression of the many by the few. So one of the things I'm looking forward to hearing about is how Labour Black Socialists will perhaps take a different view on how we oppose this draconian and frankly really scary police crime sentencing and courts bill.
Fantastic, and I think really needs to be said as well that unity that the Labour Black Socialists and other groups are proposing as well. That's something we all benefit from and we all learn from. Just before we go to that interview, just to say, if you know of any grassroots organisations in your community, maybe you're a grassroots organiser yourself, and you want a campaign or organisation to be featured on this programme, do get in touch using our email address, which is info@don'tleaveorganise. Now, without further ado, let's go to the interview. So as you heard in the introduction there, we've got a really timely set of guests, really important organisation joining us this week. Really pleased to have Ekua Bayunu, who is one of the grassroots candidates for the Women's Committee. She's an organiser in the arts, a councillor candidate in Hulme, and has recently elected to the Socialist Health Association. And she's joined by Maurice McLeod, who is a councillor in Queenstown and is the chief executive of Race on the Agenda. Ekua, Maurice, really great to have you here. Thank you for joining me. I guess we should start. Talk us through Labour Black Socialists and how and why you formed.
Well, Labour Black Socialists, I guess we can say what we are and why we are. During the sort of democratic review thing that Labour were doing when they were going to, work out how to be a more democratic party. Part of that brought groups of Black and minority ethnic members together in a space to discuss the issues they were having. And I think a number of the people in the room sort of looked around and went, "Oh God, we're in a Labour meeting that looks like that. This is so rare," and just informally kept in touch with each other. Obviously, the Bain structures in Labour weren't really doing any of the things that they were supposed to do. So this is one, I'm sure there are others of these informal groups that set up just so people could discuss the things that they felt were going on for them, especially within the Labour Party. It's members from CLPs all over the country. And as things, I would say, have got worse, as issues have come up, the group has grown and we've become more and more active. We put out joint statements on things. We support, members who we think are facing racism within the party. And it's I'm not sure what we'll grow into, but it certainly shows that there's a need, certainly within Labour, for Black, Asian and minority ethnic members to feel safe, to be able to come and have conversations in a safe environment with people that are going through the similar experiences to them. So that's why we exist at the moment.
Yeah.
And
can I just sort of add to that a little bit, which is that, I think in the last 12 months, probably spurred on by the pandemic, which has, as everyone has very recognized, has sort of highlighted the existing, disproportionate impact of existing institutionalized racism on our communities. What we've also been able to do in coming together is look at ways to raise that awareness across the party, because it's about us as individual members and as members and what we are receiving in terms of racism, sexism, but it's also about our communities not being served by this party. So what we're able to do in coming together is we're able to shape motions together, we're able to share details of incidents together, we're able to do campaigning on a local level but get a national reach. So I can give examples of that, say the tasering of Dennis Mboya in Manchester. We're able to create a statement, put it out there, and actually all of us can push it out across the country. And that sort of sense of unity gives us an impetus and a power to be able to continue to make a difference in the Labour Party.
How can we change the structures of the Labour Party to be more welcoming and hear the voices of your communities?
Most of the changes are changes that the whole membership needs, I would have said. We need processes of electing people who represent us that are truly democratic and open, and that aren't I'm going to be giving my personal opinion here, but things like open shortlists would be essential, but they're essential for all of us. And I think for me, that's what's so important about supporting organisations, Black-led organisations, is that often we're able to really pinpoint issues that impact on all of us. And that the change, when we get a win, nearly everyone gets a win. And that doesn't always happen the other way around. So what else? Obviously a complaints and disciplinary process that is fair, that's based on natural justice, that has got intrinsic biases educated out of it. Help me out here, Maurice, because there's so many, isn't it? So they'll be very familiar to you, Matt.
It's part the sort of short answer to that question is how long have you got? How many things would we change within the structures of the Labour Party? And that's not even being really overcritical of the party. It's grown organically and it's done what it's done, but it's not done that from a basis of making sure it's inclusive and anti-racist. And so in lots of ways you'd almost have to go back. Everything about how the party runs, how meetings work, and again, as Ekua said, this isn't just about making the party open so that a few Black people can come and join. It's making Labour be what it says on the tin and be the party of the people. So most of us don't grow up understanding how meetings and CLPs and LCFs and region and that's you kind of have to learn all of that to be in the party, to navigate engaging with Labour. if we can find ways of removing all of that and becoming trusting and open and, accepting that the people coming in from outside maybe have slightly different views, but that's why we need to listen to them. It's the amount of meetings I sit in where we sort of go, oh, why won't black people come through the door, or why haven't we got more? And this is in really diverse areas, and it's us as a party not being so apathetic and assuming that if we say the right magic words, we'll attract some black people. It's going to where the campaigns are. There's enough that our communities are campaigning about. Labour should be right there beside them at every step, and then it's not about converting people to join Labour. They see you and go, that's someone who stands alongside me. It's just sort of, and I guess what we're hoping to be one of the tools in is educating the party to be more like that, because that's, I think, ultimately the way that we succeed.
Sorry, just to pick up on that, because I think that last point is one of the key tools in terms of opening up the party, as I say, to everyone, which is when I first joined the party, it was like there was an assumption that I'd literally just been born, that I had no experience, that I had done. I mean, I had someone come up to me, actually the chair of my branch, practically spitting in my face, telling me I'd done nothing and had nothing basis to raise any criticisms on. And I'm like, I've worked in the community for 40 years. I'm an activist. I'm an arts activist. But there is this really weird separation, which I think we are changing. I think the movement as a whole, because as it's become a mass movement, but we need to acknowledge it within our structures, is that there is a wealth of experience in all sorts of communities who are activists in their communities, and Labour needs to reach out and operate and activate within those, rather than this sort of like rarefied world of politics that is so separate from the language of activists who want to make a difference. So that's, I think, a really huge one. But also the language. I have to say that one of the things I find really difficult is that we've adopted as a party the language, the historic language that is embedded in both sexism and racism. We use the word the whip. I mean, it's like it rankles. And I've had to go nod yes at every level, to get on panel or whatever. Yes, I'll accept the whip. And I'm like, what, on my back? As a woman, do we have legislation where men were allowed to beat their wives with a stick a certain length? Or as a black woman or a black person, I was allowed to be whipped. We use language that actually holds some of the most demonic and oppressive history in it. And we use it without thinking about it. And any point that we're not thinking, we're not socialists as far as I'm concerned, and we're not welcoming, we're not open.
So I read this statement that you put out in January, and there's some really kind of strong stuff and some really powerful, important messaging in that. I wonder if you could talk us through that, Ekua.
Starting with me. Wow. So I think what the statement really is about trying to turn the tide on the sort of, I'm going to use the word despair that we probably entered the year in terms of what is this party that we're in, that is accommodating the level of racism that we're seeing, but towards its members, towards people in leadership positions who are from Black communities. And rather than there seemed to be a real push, and I think people have responded to it, and we can have a discussion about why people leave the Labour Party and what that's about. But rather than leave, we needed to think really clearly about what action we could take that would acknowledge the reality and then address it on a sort of national party-wide basis. So we one of the things that we needed to acknowledge is that our current leadership was not giving the leadership we needed in terms of race and racism. And so we looked at a campaign that would get the membership really thinking about what it meant to be an actively anti-racist Labour Party, and to bring that right to the core of an action that we all sign up to do as members of the Labour Party, which is to support candidates through the positions of power, whether at local or at national level, at parliamentary level. And what we wanted to say to those candidates is, we're fed up just talking about the issues. We're fed up bringing, like beggars, please take notice. we now will expect you to take notice, and we will look to and reward and champion those candidates who have a record of being actively anti-racist. And that means out there knowing, learning, and acting about the issues.
Amen. Yeah, and to be honest, there's not much to add to that other than to say, to my mind, how can any Labour candidate not be a proven anti-racist? That to me, it doesn't fit with what I think the party is. And if people disagree, then make that argument. You explain to me how you can not be an anti-racist but still be a good Labour candidate. But like it's as Ekua said, it's not about being negative. It's about actively supporting those candidates who are going to make a change in our communities. That's why so many of us joined Labour and have got excited about trying to bring about a Labour government. It's because we need that change within our communities, and so we will be absolutely backing those candidates that we know will do that.
And that was a really important thing about kind of I think you said knowing and taking action and learning about this stuff. I mean, I'm embarrassed to say, but I'll admit it, that I've never considered that whip terminology before, and that's quite shocking to me, because that's so obvious when you state it in those terms. How can someone like me be an ally?
Well, I think this is what the campaign offers. It is a campaign for everyone. We've not put it out as a campaign for just Black people to be actively anti-racist. We believe, I passionately believe that the majority of our membership, we're a mass movement, are or at least want to be actively anti-racist. How they've been failed in the party is they've not been given direction or leadership. And that's where I think Labour Black Socialists are willing and able to step up. So join the campaign. We are supporting the campaign with the statement, comes a motion. The motion we're encouraging people to put through their branches, their CLPs, and their union branches as well, especially where they're affiliated to the Labour Party. And we have got a lot of resources to support that. We have the motions, but we've also got backup data, articles people can read. It's like I suppose it's really weird. It's like, yes, we're saying to our allies, join this campaign. And then we're recognizing, just as you articulated, Matt, that it's not like we're speaking into this rich canvas where this is really obvious to people, educated to voice. So we're supporting that, as I said, with motions, with backup material. We also have a program on Socialist Telly. So every week we'll address a different issue, and we are specifically bringing on Black, and we use Black to mean anybody from a community impacted by white imperialism, colonialism, slavery, to hear their voices. And for me, that's one of the most essential, is that you can get accustomed to this process that you're facilitating to Matt today, Matt. Getting accustomed to actually being able to hear and be led and find out what are the issues in your that are local to you. Recently we did a program on the Gypsy Roma traveller community, and we feel a real synergy. Now, some of that community will also regard themselves as Black, some will regard themselves as white. That's not important here. What we recognise is an oppressed community who are also memberships of the Labour Party and have a right, therefore, to have their voice heard and their community's rights championed within the Labour Party. So there will be many people who live in communities where they may not have a large African heritage or South Asian community. I grew up in Northamptonshire, small community. Northampton better than, but the village I grew up in. But there certainly was a large Gypsy Roma traveller community passing through, and the racism that was just daily, heard, can be tackled by the Labour Party through this campaign.
Absolutely. Again, there's nothing left to say, Ekua. That's exactly the purpose of our campaign. And you're asking how you be an ally, Matt. It's by listening. It's by it's by realizing because there are some brilliant white allies and advocates out there, but but realizing actually I have a platform, I have a space. Do I need to be the one taking up this space? Shall I actively go and see if somebody else could be doing that, or if I could be partnering with someone, or if I should be listening to someone? It's the performative stuff is kind of done, and great, whatever. We can all take knees, we can all do that, but it's sort of putting some skin in the game and realizing what your powers are, because we all have them. What are your powers? What are the things that you actually have an influence on, and how can you make those spaces anti-racist? How can you tackle racism in those spaces that you do have control over? It's not. I understand. I sometimes sort of white friends ask me that, and I give that sort of answer, and I can see them going, "Oh God, that sounds like a lot." Yeah, it is. It's a lot. Try living it. So yeah, just listening and listening without preconceived judgments, because you have to acknowledge, like I grew up in a society. There are things embedded in our thinking that we haven't examined that will make it hard for us to hear some of the things that Black comrades are saying, but just try to switch that off and hear with an open heart.
And I guess sort of as social, I mean, for me, I think socialism is about it's a dialogue with and about power, and where you discover imbalances and injustices of power, it's about redistributing them. Sounds very boring and clinical when you put it in those terms, but I guess what I'm saying is it's about having a self-critique and understanding where you have a privilege and trying to step back or redistribute that or use that in a productive manner. And that doesn't just have to be about race. It's about gender. It's about sexuality. It's about all kinds of different things. I want to move the conversation on to, I do think it's important we talk about, well, look, we look at the context behind this. So last summer, more or less around the same time that mounted police were doing a baton charge against Black Lives Matter protesters. And now we've got, just a few months later, this really draconian and egregious police and crime bill. I wonder if we could talk about that. I mean,
sorry, Ekua, I wasn't sure. There's the police bill is really concerning. It's really, we put out some statements on it. The impacts it could have and will have on protests and demonstrations. We all have the rights. We all have the rights enshrined in Article 11 of the Human Rights Act. We all have the right to come together and point out things that are wrong in our society. We've got that. That's what you can do in a democracy, and to sort of even the language in there, causing a nuisance and things like that. The states and the police don't get to decide what things we can complain about. No democracy would accept that as the way to go. And on top of that, the stuff in there about Gypsy Roma traveller communities, basically for a huge chunk of that community making their way of life illegal. I mean, this stuff is really and this stuff is really chilling. It's really it should worry everybody. Again, not just Black people. Everybody should be looking at this. The young women on Clapham Common where I was last Saturday, they weren't Black, but they can see the danger of an overpowered police force, or a police force that doesn't really know what it's supposed to be doing. I actually think this is bad for the police as well. They don't surely want to be making political decisions about what's a legitimate protest and what isn't. That's a really weird place for the police to be put in, and it kind of moves the blame away from the government, so they can go, oh, we didn't say Black Lives Matter shouldn't march. The police said it could be dangerous. It's a really bad move in so many ways. And I think, as with a lot of these, I mean, it's a 300-page long document. I think with a lot of these bills and acts that the government seems to put, we'll keep finding worse things in it. That's, there'll be things that they haven't considered because they don't, because they never can really consider. And as well, the additional stop and search powers, it's already a real problem. Black people are already 10 times more likely to be stopped. And now they're removing in some cases, the need for any suspicion. It's really, really concerning. And everyone that cares about liberty should be really up in arms about this. I don't even think this isn't certainly a black thing. I don't even think this is a left thing. I think that everyone who cares about freedom should be looking at this going, whoa, hang on. And when this is coming in at the same time as we're talking about voter ID for elections, and you've got people talking about, we can trade with countries abroad, regardless of their human rights. There's a whole shift going on under the cover of COVID that we all really, really need to be alarmed about.
Yeah. I mean, I think you absolutely have your finger on the button there. And also in terms of our role, this isn't just a black issue, but what we have is, because we've been at the receiving end of discriminatory policing powers for a long time, we can identify this for the whole community. We can just go, here, this is really clear. And yes, we're going to highlight the issues where it's particularly, the criminalization of a way of life is building racism into the laws of this country. Yeah. And we can highlight that, but that it's an important issue for everyone. I mean, actually, as you were speaking, Maurice, I was just like, these are the sort of basic building blocks of a military dictatorship. And It's actually the militarization of the police in order to give them those powers. Because it's not like, I was thinking about this, if we ever, the hot topic of defund the police. And I was thinking, I'm not sure if I agree with that, but I think it's how the money should be spent. There's some absolute training that needs to go, or the process of how you recruit, because, and I as a woman, as a black woman, watching what's happened, there are also individuals who, against the backdrop of a police officer being charged with murder of a woman, then went to a demonstrate or a vigil for that and laid their hands on women. And what is that process by which those individuals have had their thought processes, so skewed that they can take those actions? So there's got, I want to filter it through, and I see the responsibilities at the most senior level, in terms of the leader of this government, in terms of Cressida Dick, whatever. But I also want to know, how can we turn this around so those individuals take, who often are drawn from, working class communities, and I think therefore will come with intrinsic values that we will share, can actually start operating out of them, rather than some narrative that has made women responsible for their victimization, black people responsible for their criminalization. Do you know what I mean? There's a whole list where it shoves the responsibility onto the victim of oppression. And there is so much learning that we can take from that in terms of how do we create change. But in terms of this bill, what Maurice has said is the scary thing. We've been able to identify the stuff that's glaring, that comes out of our experience. We all need to be able to take this apart, because there is going to be more and more, and the impact on our the impact on all of our way of life, is going to be huge. And we need to mobilize. We need to get people out, everybody out, saying, no, this is a step too far. And it is difficult. I mean, I've, obviously I'm out campaigning, I'm talking to people, and it is surprising how well the media, and this is why it's great having an independent media, has convinced people that our government is doing the best they can. A government that's responsible for thousands of people's deaths are doing the best they can. And it's that same sort of washing of minds, of misinformation, that we've got to tackle at the same time. So there's the political and the media around this bill. Absolutely.
So how do we make, I mean, you touched on a really important point there about, well, several really important points, but how do we make it, how do we make people kind of really viscerally understand what the potential impacts on their way of life are going to be?
I mean, I think we need to highlight the examples of what it would be. And I think that I suppose in reality, that's already begun to happen in terms of the right for people to express their outrage when something is brought to their attention that really upsets them and they're really worried about should be an intrinsic value. So we need to keep highlighting those. It's important for us to be able to also highlight where this has been enduring, that we, like in terms of, but I don't want to get distracted into that. I think we need to bring examples to people that are really specific to their everyday lives and how this will impact on them. The problem is this is layered. This is the end of a layering of the removal of our rights. And that's been in terms of education. I mean, this is the year that we saw an attempt, possibly successfully, for socialism to be outlawed as being taught in our schools. So there we've got an issue that we could connect to, the right for our children to be educated and have an even-handed education. Make a connection between the two, because I see one, and I think it's really important. So find issues that are really important to everyone and highlight them and make the connection. So that's just one that's sort of come to me around the fact that a government can decide a school curriculum based on their ideological choice is massive. It's huge. Yeah. Link the two together.
And I do want to bring Morris in because I'm sure he's got lots of thoughts on this, but I think it's really important to highlight as well the huge hypocrisy of this. I mean, this is a government who has a major cohort sort of identify themselves as right-wing libertarians. They don't believe in an interventionist state, and yet they seem more than eager to use the levers of state to try and shape and mold a society in their image, and it's chilling. Sorry, Morris, I'd like to bring you in.
Yeah. So as Ekua says, bits of this different bits of this will impact on people's lives in different ways. I think what's important to do now is let people know what they can do about it, because I think, sadly, especially for Black communities, we're used to just going, okay, well, that's just happened. That's just a thing. And that doesn't mean, so when I say that, I don't mean we do that without resistance. We've got a long history of resistance. And that's what we need to tap into now. It's going, okay, so this is probably going to go through Parliament. We don't have the power to control what the Tory party does. Fine. What do we do next? How do we stand against this? How do we plug into I think, with a picture of Fred Hampton there behind me, I think that the building of that rainbow coalition of people and organizations and groups who are maybe not that connected before, but are gonna suddenly be going, God, this is all of us. All through last year, I remember thinking, or looking at the Extinction Rebellion and then Black Lives Matter and thinking, wow, look at these two amazing movements that are going on, that have come up like that and are strong and powerful. I wish they were more connected. I wish there was more of a merge between them, because that for me is the future. And in a weird way, so if I'm trying to be positive, something like that, I grew up in Thatcherism, and Thatcherism forced lots of things to happen, lots of good things to happen in opposition to her. Maybe in opposition to this, we get some more of the unity that I think we need.
Yeah.
So could this potentially be a kind of poll tax moment?
I think it could. I mean, it's one thing we do know about this government. It wants to play the culture war. It wants to have a them and us. So this is you're talking about libertarians in the Conservative Party. I'm sure they're not that happy with this, but they They get that it's a trigger. They get that it's the bit that they can get people that look like us going, and then they can go to the people that they're trying to talk to. See, yeah, we're not on their side. It's part of that culture war thing. It's part of that them and us thing. So, in a way, we're playing into their hands, but we have to stand against this. But they want that to happen. So I never underestimate how cynical the government will be when it comes to keeping hold of power and saying this is what we're like. We're about standing with the police and being tough. Those lot, they're about burning down statues. That's what they're trying to create. But what I feel they've miscalculated is it's not just the people burning down the statues. It's also the people caring about safety of women. It's also the people caring about LGBTQ issues. It's also the disabled. It's also, when you do that, that's the miscalculation I think that they always make. Just because people have been silenced and don't have much power and don't have much of a platform doesn't mean that we're not here.
And speaking of the miscalculation of that cynicism, of course, as Labour Party members and activists, it's essential we don't make the miscalculation of cynicism and elect bad candidates. So I think what we need is passionate, articulate campaigners, and we've got the opportunity to elect one who is with us right now, Ekua. You're part of the grassroots slate for the Women's Committee. I wonder if you could just talk us through that very quickly.
Oh my goodness me. That was a very smooth segue into that, Matt. Yes, so I actually regard myself as being in a group of 6 women who are supported either by the grassroots Labour Women and Momentum. And we are a diverse group of women who have a proven track record in terms of our politics, our socialism, our understanding of the issues impacting on working class women predominantly, and having a voice for working class women. And understanding that the new structures that are being brought into place need to have people willing to implement them. I think one of the things that we've seen in terms of BAME structures is there's just been a real lack of political will to implement them, even coming through the democracy review and being agreed at conference. So what the National Women's Committee does is it gives us the opportunity, if we elect the right candidates, strong socialist women candidates, to actually ensure that the masses of women in this party have a voice and can influence the policy making of the Labour Party. And that to me is really important.
And how can people support that campaign?
So actually the process is slightly, what I would call slightly less democratic than the one for the NEC, in that the vote will happen at Women's Conference and it will be voted on by the delegates to Women's Conference. So we're about to go into PERDA, which means the CLP's women's forums can't meet to elect those delegates, which is an interesting dilemma. But we will have a small window between May the 6th and May the 26th, I think. So what we need to ensure is that members are electing good socialist women as their women's delegates to conference. That's really, really important. And then trust us that they will get on with in creating the structures that need to happen. But across the country, those left, how we organise as a left, we need to actually have that conversation, raise it up in our discussion, because I feel like it's been lost a little. So be aware of the dates, May the 26th. I think there's 2 sets. There's a date by which you can put forward your conference delegates, and then there's a date by which the nominations, because each of the candidates need 5 nominations in order to go onto the ballot to be voted on at conference. It is, yet again, one of those complicated systems that would probably need us just to be able to take some time and breathe and talk through the various stages of Women's Conference. And, I'd love to come back and do that with you at some point, Matt.
We would love to have you back and do that. And we'll put links to all of that. If you're watching this on Twitter or Facebook, this also goes on YouTube, where the description contains links for everything we've talked about. So do go and check that out. We're coming towards the end of our time. Unfortunately, I could carry on talking for hours, I think. Maurice, just before we we end the discussion, I'm really interested to know what, as an activist, as a campaigner, as a socialist, what inspires you?
What inspires me? The people standing next to me. Always, I live where I've always lived. I live in my community. I live in my council flat here in South London. The people that I see when I'm walking around, but the people standing next to me on campaigns, the people that have the same desire as me to change the lives of everyone we've grown up with. That's what never ceases to inspire me, and young activists. Oh my God, I love young activists, and the beautiful lack of, oh, we can't do this that they have, that cynical old people like me have gone, oh, that's going to go wrong. I love the energy of young activists who go, right, well, we're not having that, we're going to change it. And I just want to support and stand alongside them as much as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. Snap, Maurice. I'm sort of with you on that. I was speaking at a BAME forum on the Wirral, and 3 of the members were in, I think, year 13. It's like, yes. So that's young, very young Black members of the Labour Party. Yeah, it did. It just like, you breathe because there's a future. I guess on top of that, and I'm a massive advocate for political education. So I come out, I was lucky enough in my very early 20s to be immersed in socialism, but from a Pan-African perspective. So, I mean, it was a process of education, of reading, of understanding the basic principles of socialism. And I'm passionate about bringing that back into the Labour Party. I don't think we talk about ideology enough. I don't think we talk about what the tenets of socialism are enough, but they continue. And I'm really aware that those tenets of socialism continue to keep me strong, to keep me here and keep me focused. And I would love to be able to share that more. I think sometimes we drop into shorthands that are not healthy for us. And I'm constantly feeling I'm needing to fight back on them. I mean, one of them recently is that we use working class to mean white as a shorthand. It's just and it's like, no, could we stop that now, right now, nip that in the bud, and let's look to a socialist route as to why we cannot do that, and why we need to understand that working class communities cross all of the other, there are disabled working class people, there are Black working class people, there are working class women, there are gay working class people. It's like, sorry. So that also keeps me strong and here.
Do you have any final message for our viewers? Is there anything you want to signpost? Anything that you think needs attention?
I'd say follow Labour Black Socialists on Twitter. Off the top of my head, I can't remember the handle, but that's because I'm really old. But just like our campaign, actively look for the anti-racist. Build the party that we want it to be. There's no entitlement of the party to be something that doesn't suit us. It's ours. It's our party, the party of the people. Let's do what we can to make this fit for us and our communities. All of us, all of us, every single one of us.
That's brilliant. I was going to wander off into other campaigns that I'm really excited about around social housing, around Black communities and homelessness, but homelessness generally. I'd say join a tenants union, or renters unions. There are lots of really strong activist initiatives, but I think around housing, it's such a basic right, around health and around education. So there's a Socialist Health Association, there's a Socialist Education Association. As I said, there's tenants unions. Get involved in those and have those at the root of your activism alongside being in the Labour Party, and do exactly what Maurice said. Follow us. I think it's Labour Black Sock 1
We'll put that up on the screen.
Okay.
But listen, Ekua, Morris, this has been a really interesting discussion. Thank you so much for your time. I really hope you'll come back on at some point because we've covered a lot of ground there and there's a lot of ground left for us to cover. But listen, thank you for everything that you do and solidarity with all your work in the future.
Thank you, Matt. Take care.
So, I mean, that was another really great set of speakers. I think 40 minutes really difficult to do them and the topic justice. So much stuff to talk about there. I mean, Kathy, what were your thoughts?
Well, I just thought what a great fit it was with us and what we're trying to achieve. We focus in this programme on grassroots organising. Labour Black Socialists focus on the wealth of experience in our communities, activists working to make change on the ground, and how do we embrace that through our current complicated party structures, acronyms, oppressive language. That bit was really interesting. And, you know, these are questions that have needed addressing for years. So the inclusivity, I think, of what Labour Black Socialists are sharing with us is actually really refreshing. They're looking at it through the lens of their experience. But I loved the way that Ekua was saying, when we win, we all win. Because of the particular insights that communities that have experienced oppression, discrimination, their radar, their antennae are perhaps more attuned, and they actually speak for all of us.
Absolutely.
So,
I mean, yeah, I mean, that was so important.
One is a win for all. I thought that was beautiful.
Yeah, definitely. And I think as well, I think it's really important to remember what the establishment gets away with doing to marginalised communities is what it would get away with doing to us if it could.
Well, exactly. Wasn't it a Tony Benn quote? Look at what your government does to refugees.
Exactly.
They would do that to us if they could get away with it. So all these things come together, I think, in our campaigning when we talk about unity and solidarity.
100%, and just the value in listening to what they've got to say and understanding the huge reward for all of us if we take that on board and take that seriously with some bravery and some humility. I think, you know, really, really exceptional organisation, real privilege to speak to those people. Yeah. We should probably say as well, at the time of recording, we didn't know that there was going to be the delay on the police and crime bill. But really important points the comrades raised, and we still have to do everything we can to resist that awful bill, don't we? Absolutely right. So extra time is extra time to organise and mobilise and make our voices heard. There have been people saying if it's delayed through to November, people will have lost impetus on it. But I really don't think so. I think that gives us a huge opportunity, and it's one of the most important things we need to be organising around. And as Morris said, an opportunity for, you know, groups who maybe don't normally work together to realise this affects all of us. This is really damaging for everybody. We've got to stand together on this one. Yes, and that was one of the things that came out, this inclusivity that Labour Black Socialists have woven right into their foundations. For me, it's actually a huge relief personally to be embraced by that group as a Black woman. People watching may understand the experience of being described as white passing or not Black enough to join particular groupings in their organising. Why should I have to, you know, have a little card explaining my mixed heritage? No, Labour Black Socialists, you are a Labour Party member, you don't identify as white, and you're a socialist. And for me, that's the first time I have felt really embraced by a group that makes a real difference on the ground.
So this isn't academic, this isn't cerebral. Education is obviously part of it, but it's let's all get together and make a difference. It's as basic as that, and it's very inclusive, refreshing, and embracing.
And women comrades who are watching, of course, can make a difference by supporting Ekua and the other grassroots candidates for the Women's Committee.
Absolutely. And we also need, working back from that, to make sure that we elect socialist women delegates to the conference, because they'll be the ones casting the vote for the 6 socialist women, 6 places on the committee.
So, Kathy, do you have any final thoughts on this week's episode?
I do. Well, I have a final thought. I don't know if it was covered in the episode. One ray of hope in the past week of sometimes despair has been the huge success of the left slate candidates in the Socialist Health Association elections. So congratulations to everyone, but particularly Ekua for being part of that campaign. And that absolutely demonstrates stay in the party, fight back, mobilise, make our voices heard in all our structures, including the new, I think they still call them BAME structures that were announced by Carol Sewell this week. So stay in the party, make your voice heard. Let's take these structures for our aims and our voices to be heard.
So there you go. I couldn't have said it better than that. So stay in the party, fight for socialism, support our black brothers and sisters, particularly in Labour black socialists. And most importantly, do not go gentle into that good night. Watch Educate, Agitate, Organise every Saturday night. Thank you, and we'll see you next week.
Fantastic solidarity.